Part 57. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 562. Radiation Engineers. Haha, okay, I'm so sleepy that Wang Ling has the foresight. When it comes to radiation engineers, whether it is General Li Wiki or Xiaoping Wang, their eyes light up. In reality, units such as radiation engineers are simply sunspots in the game, specially designed to hack a certain force. However, it is undeniable that this type of unit has its own unique features, especially after it is deployed. It can produce a large-scale radiation circle, and the radiation attack is indiscriminate between the enemy and ourselves. The damage to infantry is particularly considerable. It is simply the best unit to cope with the current situation. After confirming that the radiation engineers were available, General Li Wiki immediately issued an order to use a multifunctional infantry vehicle to carry 3 radiation engineers and drove out of the Oriental Castle area early and galloped deep into the Holy City. During these days of rest and development, the Allies also built 2 crack generators inside the Holy City, creating 2 artificial dark areas on the electronic map of Yuri's troops. The target of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle is the one at the front, located approximately in the center of the Holy City. Due to the speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, Yuri's troops arrived at that area early, dropped 3 radiation engineers and then turned around and returned. As for the 3 radiation engineers, they had a sad and heroic feeling, carrying the radiation reactor on their shoulders, standing in front of the crack generator, staring ahead, as if they were dead. Their mission is to block Yuri's infantry at all costs and delay the construction of defense forces for the base, even if it results in sacrifice. After arranging 3 radiation engineers, General Li Wiki finally gained some confidence. However, the situation is still very serious and not optimistic. After thinking about it, General Li Wiki mobilized all the remaining terrorist robots in the base, a total of 15. This quantity is not small, but it is still very reluctant to cope with the current situation. As a last resort, it ordered the tank factory to produce additional terrorist robots after the self-destructing truck, and even contacted General Reagan. Because Wang Ling had privately exchanged some arms with Agent Tanya during the meeting between the 2 armies, now there are still 8 terror robots available for use in the Allied forces camp. General Reagan did not agree with General Li Wiki's proposal at first. After all, the Allies were very precious to these 8 terrifying robots and did not want to waste them easily. But then he considered that in a few days it would be time for the 2 armies to exchange military technology for the first time. By then, he would have acquired the technology to make terrifying robots. As long as he had the funds, he could make as many as he wanted. General Reagan gritted his teeth. Agreed to the proposal. As a result, the 2 armies joined forces and dispatched all the more than 20 terrorist robots in the base and distributed them in the Holy City area. Although the terrorist robots have the power to instantly kill infantry, the infantry can also counter-kill them at any time. It is difficult to fight against a large-scale infantry team. Therefore, the goal of these terrorist robots from the beginning is to be the armor type that will be dispatched by Yuri's troops in the future. Arms. In this large-scale attack by Yuri's troops, the number of armored units must be quite large, and the density of the attack must be extremely high. If they are successfully invaded by terrorist robots, it will inevitably have a huge impact on the entire armored unit army. It will only make them sick for a moment, and it can also reduce the pressure and burden on the base. Across. At the edge of the Holy City, the large-scale infantry regiment of Yuri's troops is still charging. Although the Holy City is not too big, it is relatively small. It takes a long time for the infantry to rush through the entire process. They have to rush to where the radiation engineers are. The dark area may take some time. During this period, after the commanders of the 2 armies deployed these 2 killer moves, they set their sights on the construction of defense forces on the other side of the bridge outside the eastern castle area. Although those two major killing moves can give Yuri's troops a decisive blow and severely defeat Yuri's troops, they cannot really stop the entire Yuri's troops. At that time, the main force of the defensive battle will still be these defensive buildings. Time was still passing minute by second. On the other side of the bridge, many engineers were working almost against the clock, speeding up the construction of defense forces. In the next period of time, various defensive buildings were erected on the positions of the two armies. During this period, the tank factories of the two armies were not idle. The coalition forces stepped up their efforts to produce self-destructing trucks and terrorist robots, while the Allies also temporarily increased their efforts to produce phantom tanks. All possible deployments have basically been done. At this moment, General Lewicki looked at the electronic map from the command hall and sighed, "Why does it feel more stressful to fight against Yuri's troops than before against the Allies? General, this is normal. Otherwise, why would we still need our two armies to unite to fight against the Seoul Empire?" Raoski said with relief. King Xiaoming thought of Wang Ling from the side. "I wonder what Wang Ling would have planned if he were here? This guy always has some unique tricks to deal with Yuri's troops." Rovitsky retorted, "Even if he is here, he may not be able to respond in time. In the past, when dealing with the joint attack of multiple arms of Yuri's troops, wasn't it also like he was in a hurry?" "That's true. Haha, don't underestimate Wang Ling. I have received news that this guy has passed the assessment and successfully completed the elite combat soldier training and enhanced training. He has officially become a hero-level unit of the coalition, and is in the process of on the way back quickly." General Lewicki smiled happily. "Really?" Hearing the news, Xiaoping Wang and Raoski were both surprised and asked repeatedly, "Then when will he arrive? Can he catch up with the battle?" "I don't know about this either. Anyway, I hope he can arrive in time. I also really want to see with my own eyes how powerful the coalition's heroic units and elite combat soldiers are." Across. In the Holy City, the infantry troops acting as the vanguard are still advancing non-stop. The hundreds of wild orcs at the front seem to be able to shake the entire Holy City when they run. Their huge size seems to be able to crush all obstacles. Strength. In the rear, a group of Yuri recruits were not to be outdone. Although their individual combat effectiveness was not as good as that of the wild orcs, they were extremely numerous and arrayed together to form an extremely powerful combat force. The number of psychic troops and virus snipers in the rear has been greatly reduced, but they are not far behind the army. The army charged, and the overall speed was not very fast, but after advancing for a long time, they finally reached their first target, which was the dark area in the center of the Holy City. And there, 3 radiation engineers were ready to fight to the death. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 563. General, the infantry regiment of Yuri's army has arrived. After observing the movement of Yuri's troops on the electronic map, Xiaoping Wang hurriedly reported it. General Lewicki quickly opened the electronic video. After seeing this scene, he gritted his teeth and immediately radioed, "Attention radiation engineers, the enemy is approaching, prepare to deploy." "Yes, General." The 3 radiation engineers responded immediately, with some absolute certainty in their voices. Across. It has to be said that the crack generator used by Confusion is really effective. Yuri's troops cannot observe the situation in this area from the electronic map, so they can only send troops to detect it face to face. The infantry team of Yuri's troops came in force. They were not sure what was in this area, so they could only explore it forcefully. Even if it was empty, they would destroy the crack generator. With this idea in mind, the vanguard of the infantry team, the group of 5 strong orcs, has successfully broken into this dark area. During the initial detection, they found that this area was empty and had nothing. However, As they got closer to the crack generator and explored a larger area, they finally exposed the 3 radiation engineers. As a result, a disaster for the infantry regiment of Yuri's troops broke out in an instant. Deploy. After seeing this point on the electronic map, General Lewicki quickly used wireless wires to give orders to the radiation engineers. After receiving the order, the 3 radiation engineers inserted the radiation reactor into the ground without hesitation, and at the same time turned the output power to the maximum. The radiation energy of the 3 radiation reactors was superimposed, and the radiation was immediately spread throughout the area. The area is full of greenery as far as the eye can see. However, this green is not a good color, it is deadly radiation energy. Oh. Oh ho. Oh. Dot. As a result, the vanguard group, that is, the Orc army, suffered a disaster in an instant. As long as they were within the radiation range, the health bars above their heads were rapidly shrinking, and they melted into a pool of pus in a short time. The scene extraordinarily cruel, simply shocking. Otherwise, the radiation engineers were originally the sunspots in the game. Originally, the radiation energy of 1 radiation engineer was enough to contaminate a large area of land and turn it into a cemetery for infantry, let alone 3 radiation engineers working together now. 3 radiation reactors, the green color is even more exaggerated, the range is larger, and the power is stronger. Even armored units, that is, tanks and vehicles, can hardly withstand this dark green radiation damage for long, and their health bars will continue to shrink, let alone infantry. That's almost an instant kill. At this moment, 100 of the pioneer group of wild orcs were killed. The remaining wild orcs were on the edge of radiation, and their health bars were not depleted immediately. However, these group of wild orcs were so excited that they did not react at all. What's going on? I was still charging forward. As I went deeper into the radiation layer, the damage became more and more intense. In the end, I still couldn't survive. A large number of wild orcs were turned into thick water. However, the following wild orcs were still charging one after another. As a result, they were killed one after another under the radiation damage. In the end, 7 out of 10 of the entire wild orc army was wiped out. At this time, the remaining orcs finally woke up, stopped charging, and retreated quickly to avoid this deadly radiation circle. However, Yuri's new recruits who arrived later had not yet suffered, and they were very disapproving of the orcs' actions, so they rushed into the radiation circle on a large scale, and tragedy happened again. Oh. Oh ho. Oh. Dot. After being exposed to the radiation circle, a large number of Yuri's recruits suffered. Their health bars were depleted at a speed even faster than that of the orcs. When exposed to the radiation layer, they turned into thick water in just a few breaths. This scene can be described as very miserable, but Yuri's new recruits, who care about food but not fighting, are still charging hard. As a result, many more Yuri recruits suffered disaster and melted in the radiation circle. After suffering such heavy losses in a row, this group of Yuri recruits finally knew how powerful they were and no longer dared to laugh at the orcs. They stopped collectively. The army seemed to have encountered some kind of invisible barrier. All those who arrived in this area the Corps stopped collectively, unable to cross. Hiss. Too horrible. In the eastern castle, whether it was the Allies or the coalition, almost everyone on both sides was watching the battle. After seeing the miserable situation of Yuri's troops, even the hostile forces couldn't help but gasp. General Reagan of the Allied forces was particularly touched by this, because before the negotiations began, Wang Ling also tried to arrange 2 radiation engineers into the eastern castle in order to check and balance Agent Tanya. Although he felt a little crazy and scary at the time, he didn't take it too seriously. It wasn't until he saw the scene with his own eyes that he realized how ruthless Wang Ling had arranged it. If the radiation engineers were really allowed to enter the Eastern Castle at that time and were suddenly deployed after the talks between the two parties collapsed, would he also? Thinking of this, General Reagan felt excited all over. Okay. This is the effect you want. The infantry regiment no longer dares to approach the radiation circle easily. Stop them. Radiation engineers are really scary. Contrary to General Reagan's fear, as for the coalition forces, the situation in the command post was completely different. After the inevitable shock, General Lewicki and the three generals became a little excited. General Lewicki's original purpose was to rely on these three radiation engineers to stop the enemy's advance, even if it was only a temporary delay. Not only did these three radiation engineers do it, but they also killed a large number of special forces. In the infantry team, the effect was simply better than he expected. To put it bluntly, this is also due to the proper use of the arms. Under normal circumstances, radiation engineers cannot play a big role in the defense of the base. After all, they are surrounded by comrades and cannot exert their true lethality. But at the moment, Yuri's infantry regiments are all around, deploying unscrupulously, and there is no need to worry about accidental damage. The true use of the radiation engineers can be said to be fully utilized. But in the base, when the generals on both sides had different expressions, in the center of the holy city, next to the crack generator, the large area radiation circle was getting weaker and smaller, and the scope was getting smaller and smaller. It seemed to be the energy consumption of the radiation reactor. Signs of exhaustion. This scene, in the eyes of Yuri's infantry team, was somewhat surprising. Some of the bold orcs and Yuri's new recruits took a few tentative steps forward and found that the radiation in this area had indeed been reduced, and it was not even enough to attack the infantry. The damage was done, and I couldn't help but feel a little complacent. As the radiation circle shrank, a large number of infantry began to follow. However, when the radiation circle shrank to a certain extent, the three radiation engineers suddenly turned on the power of the radiation reactor to the maximum in the next moment. The radiation circle that had originally shrunk and weakened expanded in an instant, and this batch of wild orcs and Yuri recruits who rushed in were all covered. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 564. Oh. Ugh. Oh. Dot. The sudden change in the radiation circle caused hardship to the infantry team of Yuri's army. Originally, the radiation circle shrank and the infantry team followed up, but it suddenly expanded again, and all the soldiers who entered the circle were affected. Under the influence of large-scale radiation, many soldiers turned into pus after struggling for a short time. The other Yuri recruits and wild orcs who were lucky enough to be outside the radiation circle gritted their teeth after feeling intense fear. These three radiation engineers were so cunning. In fact, this is not because the radiation engineers are cunning, but rather the normal operation of the radiation engineers after they are deployed. Radiation is released to the land all the time, and the radiation power cannot remain stable all the time. There is always a process of attenuation, and the radiation engineers will increase the power again after the radiation weakens to a certain extent, so that's why the radiation just happened. Situation. This can be said to be a disguise trick on Yuri's infantry team. In this moment, nearly 100 soldiers died tragically. Counting this round of losses, Yuri's infantry team has lost more than 300 people in the radiation circle, and the total number of the entire infantry team has dropped by 30%. And it was only 3 radiation engineers who caused this scene. Just with this record, 3 radiation engineers are enough. However, their mission does not stop there. They must continue to hinder the advancement of Yuri's troops. After wiping out a large number of Yuri's troops, the radiation circle continues to exist in this area and repeats the process of shrinking and increasing. As for the infantry regiments of Yuri's troops on the periphery, after suffering the previous heavy losses, they are all wise now. No one is willing to take a step out of the thunder pool. No matter how narrow the radiation circle is, they are still unwilling to move forward. Because there were so many people, the whole Yuri infantry regiment inevitably spread a long distance. In the following period, Yuri recruits gathered here one after another, and the ranks grew larger and larger, but no one was willing to cross the step of. From this aspect, the 3 radiation engineers have successfully completed their mission, delaying the Yuri infantry regiment for so long. When used in the right place, radiation engineers are indeed so powerful that it gives people a headache. However, no matter how correct the situation is, this type of unit is not invincible. There are indeed restrained units in Yuri's infantry team, such as virus snipers. The battle line of the Yuri infantry regiment was stretched too far, and the psychic troops and virus snipers were greatly left behind. However, after the vanguard was blocked for so long, these forces finally arrived at the gathering place. As a result, when the virus snipers saw this scene, they were very angry. Several virus snipers crossed the crowd and began to kill the radiation engineers from a distance. As a result, each radiation engineer received 2 virus bullets. He was shot dead, and his body exploded into a cloud of virus smoke that drifted in the wind. These radiation engineers eventually died in the holy city. However, the radiation engineers died in the battle, but the radiation circle they left behind is still there, retaining its strong lethality against the infantry, and still hindering the progress of the Yuri infantry regiment, making them dare not move forward. Of course, without the radiation engineers controlling the radiation reactor, this radiation circle would lose its subsequent power, gradually shrinking under the vigilance of the Yuri troops, until finally, it completely disappeared. It stands to reason that when the radiation layer disappears, this group of Yuri troops should naturally jump up. But in fact, after being bitten by a snake and fearing the well rope for 10 years, the group of wild orcs and Yuri recruits on the periphery seemed to be affected by this. The radiation layer was so frightened that they did not dare to cross forward for a long time after the radiation layer disappeared. The infantry army was blocked here for a long time. Finally, under the guidance of several psychic troops, they officially crossed over. In this area, it was discovered that there was no longer any radiation lethality, so they rushed in on a large scale. The 2 combat arms focused their fire and exploded the crack generator almost instantly, and then continued to move towards the next dark area. After such a long period of obstruction by the radiation engineers, 5 self-destruction trucks were finally successfully built in the coalition base. Under the order of General Lewicki, they quickly drove out of the Oriental Castle area and parked next to another crack generator, preparing to the next wave of entrapment plans is ready. Although I despise the coalition's radiation engineers, I have to admit this time that these 3 soldiers did a really good job. On the other hand, in the Allied base, General Reagan witnessed the Yuri infantry regiment being blocked by 3 radiation engineers for so long. He finally felt a little awe of the radiation engineers in his heart, and was also a little amazed at the deployment of the coalition forces. After staring at the Yuri infantry team in the electronic video for a while, General Reagan gritted his teeth and made a corresponding decision: we can't let the coalition steal all the limelight. This group of infantry has no air defense capabilities. Go, they will send all the 10 rocket pilots who are preparing for battle in the base to stop the Yuri infantry regiment on the way. Yes. A deputy took the order and quickly initiated the notification. After the notice was issued, the 10 rocket pilots in the Allied camp who were ready to replace their comrades on the defense line immediately set off and flew across the river. Relying on the superior maneuverability of the Air Force, they quickly flew over the holy city. Not long after, they hit the enemy. The Yuri infantry regiment on the ground carried out a one-sided massacre. Choo choo choo. Choo choo choo. These 10 rocket pilots are all still at the novice level, their numbers are not large, and their firepower is not strong enough. But who makes it possible that there are no natural enemies in this Yuri infantry regiment? Relying on air superiority, these rocket pilots shoot unscrupulously, staring at an enemy target and trying to kill it. If a single shot does not do enough damage, then fire a few more shots. After killing it, they will not stop and continue to stare at it. Aim for the next target and shoot. This approach is not so much blocking as it is harvesting. One is killed one by one, and one pair is killed one by one. Anyway, this group of ground infantry cannot touch them. As for this group of Yuri infantry regiment, they had just been defeated by 3 radiation engineers before. Now that they had just crossed that hurdle, 10 more bugs came. They stared at them and beat them, not to mention feeling angry. But they didn't have any type of arms that could defend themselves from the air. As a result, they could only let the rocket pilots fire, but they couldn't fight back. The whole army gritted their teeth and continued to advance. Whoever was targeted would be unlucky. In this way, during the advance, the 10 rocket pilots were like tarsal maggots, unable to get rid of them no matter what. Soldiers of the Yuri infantry regiment continued to lose their lives during the advance. Fortunately, their base is large enough, and the rocket troopers' killing speed is very limited. The infantry team can withstand this kind of harassment in a short period of time. Tisk, tisk. I didn't expect that the Allies are smart. While these rocket pilots were harassing the harvesters along the way, General Lewicki looked at the scene in the command post of the coalition base and was a little surprised. Rovitsky was also dumbfounded, yes, because these infantry have no defense and control capabilities and are harvested by rocket pilots, this group of infantry is quite useless. Although the killing speed is not fast, after a long time, these infantry the group also has to strain its muscles and bones, right? Yes, but there must be enough time. Look at the electronic map. It seems that the armored units of Yuri's army have been assembled and are starting to move out. Different dimension red alert world. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 565. Just as General Lewicki and Rouski were discussing their opinions, King Xiaoping suddenly poured cold water on them out of habit. The two people hurriedly looked at the electronic map. Sure enough, they saw a large number of purple light spots surging at the edge of the holy city. When they zoomed into an electronic video, they could see that what these purple light spots represented were all special objects. There are already more than 30 armored vehicles in the armored force here. And looking at the frequency with which they are surging now, it is obvious that they have assembled and are ready to leave at any time. Sure enough, not long after seeing this place, this group of armored troops seemed to have received the order, started to act collectively, and filed into the holy city area. In the next period of time, Yuri tanks flashed out in the electronic video. The sight of vehicles, one after another, is dizzying. This scene lasted for a long time before the purple light spots on the electronic map stopped expanding. At this time, the total number of tanks and vehicles of various types pouring into the holy city had exceeded 150. 150 cars. If this were any other place, with its powerful firepower, it would be enough to overwhelm the two bases, not to mention that there are many magneto-electric tanks and mind-controlled vehicles in them. Adding together the series of difficult armored units, such a huge number is simply frightening to see. Why so many? After seeing the size of this group of armored units, General Lewicki couldn't help but gasp. In the coalition base, Rouski's face turned bitter, and King Xiaoping clenched his teeth. The three of them all felt unprecedented pressure at this moment. After all, General Lewicki had a strong psychological quality. After the shock, he quickly regained his composure. What is supposed to come will come after all. However, with more than 150 tanks, don't let us just admit defeat. Pass the order, the defense buildings on the front line, speed up the progress for me, and be sure to strengthen the defense before the enemy arrives. At the same time, order the terrorist robots to forcibly harass. Yes, General. After Zhao Mingwang accepted the order, he rushed to notify him. The movements of Yuri's troops have naturally been observed by the Allies. After a period of panic, General Reagan also made a decision similar to General Li Weiqi. After receiving the order, more than 20 terrorist robots scattered in the Holy City in advance, acted quickly, bypassed the vanguard of the Yuri Infantry Regiment, and quickly approached its armored units. To deal with such a large-scale armored force, terrorist robots are the most suitable. As long as a tank is successfully invaded, what awaits the enemy will be continuous harassment. Gata gata. Gata gata. The speed of the terrorist robots was no slower than that of the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. More than 20 terrorist robots marched at full speed. After a short period of galloping, they approached the Yuri armored corps, and then began a collective attack. Boom. Boom boom boom. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Click. Click, click, click. Naturally, this group of armored corps will not just watch the attack of the terrorist robots. Whenever it enters its range, the surrounding tanks, whether they are tornado tanks or gate tanks, all rush to fight back, and even a magnetic tank behind them, the electric tank, also temporarily absorbed one, forced it to hang in the air, and gave it to the getter tank to blow it up. In the end, almost half of the more than 20 terrifying robots were destroyed. However, the terror robots were too mobile, and it was difficult to defend them all if more than 20 of them acted together. In the end, 6 terror robots successfully invaded and got into 4 getter tanks and 2 tornado tanks respectively. The interior began to be forcibly destroyed. The originally mighty armored corps was suddenly invaded by 6 terrorist robots. This was not to mention disgusting for this armored corps, but they did not realize that forcibly attacking the invaded tanks would destroy the terrorist robots together. After suffering this dumb loss, the entire army gritted its teeth and continued to move forward. During this period, the 6 terror robots went crazy and continued to destroy. After destroying the target tank, they were just exposed. Without waiting for the other tanks to react, they suddenly got into the tank next door and continued to destroy it. After destroying it, it immediately changes its target, just like a terrifying parasite. As a result, tanks in this entire armored corps exploded one after another during the march. All the tanks were helpless against these terrifying robots. Of course, nothing is absolute, and these 6 terrifying robots are not absolutely safe. During the march, an invaded tornado tank seemed to have been accidentally squeezed out of the team and deviated slightly. It happened to be that when it deviated, the terror robot completely destroyed it and exposed it. But before it could continue to drill into the next target, a GET tank not far away suddenly opened fire and blew it up. For another example, in the tank group, after a terrifying robot that had just destroyed the target tank was exposed, they had already determined the next target and took a posture to attack. However, when it came into contact with the target, a robot behind it, however, the magneto-electric tank suddenly reacted and attached its adsorption column in mid-air, forcing it to hang in the air. Then several getter tanks concentrated their fire and killed it in an instant. After destroying more than 30 tanks of the entire armored corps in this way, the 6 terror robots have also been reduced by more than half. Now only 2 are still being destroyed, and the remaining 4 have been bombarded by mistake. Burst. While the terrorist robots were causing trouble, the 10 rocket pilots also received temporary orders. Originally, they were shooting indiscriminately over the infantry regiment, and all of them had even been promoted to 1-star veterans. However, under the order, they suddenly changed their goals and rushed to the rear of the infantry team to take the lead in killing the virus snipers and snipers who posed the greatest threat to the defense line. Psychic troops. After all, everything they did before was only consuming and harassing Yuri's troops, but could not truly block and destroy them. The real battle would still take place on the defense lines of the two armies. The destruction and harassment continued all the time, and amidst the harassment, Yuri's troops continued to advance. The mobility of the armored corps was, after all, higher than that of the infantry corps. They were the last to arrive, and they set off so long after the infantry regiment. However, before reaching the second crack generator, the vanguard had already caught up with the infantry corps. Previously, the 10 rocket pilots relied on the Yuri infantry regiment, which had no air defense capabilities, and harvested unscrupulously. But now, the restrained troops have finally arrived. There are many Get tanks in the vanguard of the armored corps. After the merger, they all shooting, all 10 rocket pilots were swept away. During this period, 10 rocket pilots harvested a total of more than 100 and dozens of Yuri infantry, including more than a dozen virus snipers and more than 20 psychic troops. It can be said that they have already completed the task of harassment excellently. With the death of the rocket pilot, the infantry teams that had been harassed one after another finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, before they could do anything, a self-destructing truck suddenly drove up not far away. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 566. Now, the infantry team of Yuri's force and the vanguard of the armored corps have approached the area of the second crack generator. Within the area of influence of this dark area, there are 5 self-destruction trucks on standby at any time. This self-destructing truck is different from the radiation engineer. Although it is extremely powerful, it is a one-time explosive tool. It is difficult to block the advancement of Yuri's troops for as long as the radiation engineer. Moreover, the armor of this self-destructing truck is extremely low, and the explosion causes indiscriminate destruction. If there are several trucks in a group, if one of them explodes, all the self-destructing trucks will explode with it. It seems that considering these restrictions, General Li Wiki adopted Wang Ling's previous approach and drove the self-destruction trucks into the enemy's range one by one. This is how this self-destruction truck came alone. Yuri's troops didn't know whether they recognized the self-destruction truck. In short, after seeing the self-destruction truck approaching and identifying it as an enemy unit, the infantry and tanks on the periphery opened fire without hesitation. Result: boom. Immediately, a large mushroom cloud rose up, triggering a large-scale violent explosion. In an instant, more than 30 infantrymen died tragically, dozens of infantrymen were injured to varying degrees, and 4 Get tanks exploded. 7 or 8 Getter tanks and Tornado tanks were injured to varying degrees. The explosion at this moment had already blinded this group of Yuri troops, causing heavy damage. However, the impact of the self-destructing truck is not just the explosion at this moment. After the explosion, it will also leave nuclear radiation everywhere. As a result, the group of injured soldiers were exposed to the nuclear radiation, and the health bar on their heads quickly shrunk. The wounded were reduced to puddles of pus before they could hold on for long, and the lightly wounded were seriously injured by radiation soon after. Fortunately, the radiation effect of the self-exploding truck did not last too long. The remaining seriously injured people were about to die from radiation, and the radiation layer all over the place had quickly retreated. Speaking of which, this group of Yuri troops was really in trouble. They were initially blocked by radiation engineers and suffered heavy losses. They were held back for a long time before they relied on virus snipers to break the situation. But then they encountered rocket pilots who came to forcibly harvest them. The entire infantry group endured this cowardice and continued to move forward. Subsequent armored forces were dispatched, but they were entangled by the coalition and allied terrorist robots, and suffered heavy losses. After a long period of suffering, they finally overcame these obstacles, but another self-destructing truck came with a loud bang and bombed them so hard that the heads of the vanguard were buzzing, making them feel angry and frustrated. But who can blame this? The invasion of Yuri's troops has attracted the attention of the coalition and allied forces. If they are not eliminated, the coalition and allied forces will face the risk of destruction. In this case, who are you to hate? If not, who will you bomb? Moreover, 5 self-destruction trucks have been produced, and it was just the first one. After Yuri's troops came to their senses, although they were blown away, they continued to move forward under military orders. But as the troops advanced for a while, another self-destructing truck appeared in front. Yuri's troops, who didn't care about fighting, just blew it up again, so. Boom. Another large mushroom cloud rose, killing dozens of soldiers and damaging more than a dozen tanks to varying degrees, forcibly blocking the progress of Yuri's troops. That's not all. After all, Yuri's troops are now getting closer to the second crack generator, and there is not much time left for the remaining 3 self-destruction trucks. As a result, the radiation from this explosion has not disappeared, and the third self-destruction truck has already arrived. According to General Lewiecki's budget, these 5 self-destructing trucks exploded one after another, which not only effectively reduced the number of enemy troops, but also blocked them as much as possible, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. However, the plan could not keep up with the changes, and the battlefield situation changed too quickly. Before the third self-destructing truck entered the fire circle of Yuri's troops, the follow-up troops of its armored forces had gradually arrived, a magneto-electric tank. It had already absorbed the self-destructing truck from a very long distance and forced it to hang in the air. The getter tank at the front also took advantage of the height of the self-destructing truck to spin its Gatling gun and spray out a series of fire snakes, blowing it up in an instant. Boom! The self-destructing truck that exploded in the air also erupted into a large mushroom cloud. However, this explosion, whether it was a direct shockwave or subsequent radiation, failed to affect Yuri's troops at all and was completely wasted. While the self-destruction truck exploded, Yuri's troops rushed in again, and were about to enter the dark area of the crack generator. The 2 self-destruction trucks waiting inside finally couldn't wait any longer, and both of them came out at once. Rushed towards Yuri's troops. However, Yuri's army now has restrained troops and cannot make any more achievements. The 2 magneto-electric tanks once again attracted him, forced him to hang in the air, and gradually pulled him to his side. This time, the getter tanks of Yuri's army seemed to have locked onto the crack generator in the dark area. Not one of them paid attention to the self-destructing truck in the air. They all rushed into the dark area and started to fire the crack generator. Taking advantage of this gap, 2 self-destruction trucks had successfully landed next to the magneto-electric tank. However, they were not given time to explode. The 2 mind control vehicles instantly controlled them all and became part of Yuri's army. Hateful. Seeing this scene with his own eyes, General Lewiecki gritted his teeth in anger and punched the control panel in the command post of the coalition base. "General, what should we do now?" Rovitsky asked quickly. General Lewiecki closed his eyes, raised his head and took a deep breath, and then slowly opened his eyes. "There is no way, Yuri's troops have already rushed here, get ready to fight." "How many defensive buildings are there on the front line now?" Zhao Pingwan quickly reported. "General, we have made full use of the time delayed by the radiation engineers and self-destruction trucks. Now a total of 8 combat bunkers have been built on the other side of the bridge, and all the mobilization troops have been stationed. There are also 6 magnetic storms coils and 10 sentry guns, plus other mobilization troops and tanks. The Allies also took the opportunity to build a lot of defensive buildings. In a head-to-head confrontation, it is not yet known who will win and who will lose. Okay, let me know, get ready for battle." "Yes." Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Boom. 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 Choo-choo-choo. In the Holy City, next to the second crack generator, a large number of Yuri troops were setting fire to demolish it. Although this crack generator is strong enough, how can it withstand such a large and intensive bombardment by Yuri's troops? The result was a rapid fire and explosion. After finally demolishing 2 crack generators and clearing 2 dark areas, Yuri's troops then gathered unscrupulously. When all follow-up troops arrived in this area, the army finally charged again. This time, their target is the location of the coalition and allied forces. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 567. After delaying for so long, this battle is finally approaching. Several defense lines of the coalition and allied forces became tense, polished the barrels of their guns, and pointed them forward. After this period of delay and attrition, Yuri's troops did indeed suffer a lot of losses. About 500 infantry troops were harvested in various forms, and nearly 50% of them were lost. The armored troops are also having a hard time. To this day, there is still a terrifying robot lurking in the team, destroying one tank from time to time, and then getting into another to continue destroying it. Up to now, including the explosion of 2 self-destructing trucks, a total of more than 40 armored vehicles have exploded, more than 20 vehicles have been damaged to varying degrees, and the overall loss has exceeded 30%. However, after all, the base of Yuri's troops attacking this time is too large. Even though the coalition and allied forces have spared no effort to consume them so far, there are still 500 to 600 infantry and more than 100 tanks. This is very difficult for the defense lines of the 2 armies. Which is also a big pressure. The remaining Yuri troops were either too ambitious or unclear about the strength of the defense lines of the 2 armies. After they merged into one place, they did not specialize in one place. Instead, they divided the infantry team and the armored corps equally. The 2 groups attacked the coalition and allied defense lines respectively. As a result, the pressure on the defense lines of the 2 armies dropped sharply, but the situation was still not optimistic. It is worth mentioning that the 2 controlled self-destruction trucks on the coalition side did not separate. Yuri's troops seemed to want revenge, but they took the wrong direction. The 2 self-destruction trucks separated from the team alone and headed towards the Allied defense line. Opened over. The Allies had already seen the power of this self-destructing truck. Seeing this scene on the electronic map, General Reagan was startled and quickly ordered the infantry deployed on the front line to retreat. After all, the damage this self-destructing truck does to infantry is really terrifying. However, the self-destruction trucks were not too far away from the Allied defense lines. Before the infantry had completely evacuated, the 2 self-destruction trucks had already driven over, and were shot by 2 light prism towers in a row. Boom! The 2 self-destructing trucks exploded almost at the same time. 2 large mushroom clouds rose up and spread out billowing shock waves. In an instant, they destroyed a light prism tower and 2 machine gun bunkers, and several defensive buildings were damaged to varying degrees. Of course, the heaviest casualties were the infantry. The infantry who failed to evade in time were affected by the shock wave. In an instant, nearly 20 Allied soldiers were killed or injured, and even nearby tanks were affected and damaged. This explosion completely destroyed the first line of defense of the Allied forces and made General Reagan feel uncomfortable. Admittedly, this loss is still less than the previous bombing of Yuri's troops, but it must be understood that this self-destructing truck is a weapon of the coalition forces. In the end, it was controlled by Yuri's troops and bombed his Allied defense line. Although he knew that this was not the original intention of the coalition, he was still a little dissatisfied with the coalition in his heart. But there is no way, this is the Yuri force. Anyone who has a mind but is not strong enough can be controlled at any time in front of the Yuri force. This is the most annoying thing about the Yuri force. But now, it is not the time to worry about this. The 2 self-destructing trucks are just appetizers. After the radiation left by the explosion of the self-destructing trucks disappears, The army of Yuri's troops in the rear will follow suit, with the infantry as the vanguard, and begin a strong attack. Swish. 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 Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Chirp. Chirp chirp. At the Allied defense line, 7 or 8 light prism towers reacted quickly and fired light prism rays continuously. Each shot could kill a Yuri recruit. The machine gun bunker also sprayed out fire snakes, each of them fiercely attacked Yuri's troops in front of them. Allied soldiers who had temporarily retreated due to self-destructing trucks also quickly returned to their positions and launched a fierce counterattack after deployment. In addition, the 10 Phantom tanks also fired concentrated cannons. Every time the body shape of the tank was changed, a cannon would be fired. Each cannon could kill a Yuri recruit, causing his body to burst into flames and scream in agony. Of course, the ones who did the most considerable damage to the infantry were the SEALs. In the absence of Agent Tanya, the SEALs naturally took over this responsibility. They stood on the front line and fired rapidly. The rate of fire was extremely fast. Any Yuri recruits within their range fell like wheat in rows. The offensive firepower of Yuri's troops was also very powerful. More than 200 Yuri's recruits pressed forward and withstood the fierce counterattack of the Allies. After being in position, they began to concentrate their fire and launch substantial spiritual power, attacking 3 times, 5 times, and 2 times. Several machine gun bunkers were exploded and 3 or 2 light prism towers were demolished. But overall, Yuri's troops suffered faster losses. After all, the SEALs fired so fast that it was difficult for ordinary infantry to break into their firing range. But Yuri's troops invaded not just infantry. During the fierce battle on the front line, the armored regiments of Yuri's troops finally arrived in this area. Tornado tanks and Get tanks swarmed up and tried their best to dismantle the light prism tower. There were even more than 10 thick purple strong magnetic waves in the distance, which forcibly absorbed the light prism tower and quickly disassembled it together with other troops. The mind control vehicle was even more unscrupulous, slowly bypassing the armored corps and infantry teams, rushing to the front, and began to control the Allied infantry on a large scale. Even the surrounding Grizzly tanks and multifunctional infantry vehicles were affected and forcibly controlled. Live. However, after all, he had seen how difficult this mind control vehicle was, and General Reagan had already given the order. When the 10 Phantom tanks noticed the approach of the mind control vehicle, they gave up all other targets and concentrated their firepower to bombard the mind control vehicle. Car. Relying on phantom camouflage, on this chaotic front, the mind control vehicles were unable to detect these cold-blooded phantom tanks for a while. They were just forcibly controlling the Allied troops on their own. However, during the control process, many mind control vehicles they have been blown up one after another. The biggest reliance of Yuri's troops is on the Allied defense line, which is suffering losses one after another. On this front, the flames of war spread, fierce and stalemate. And when there were repeated battles here, the Allied defense line was certainly not peaceful, and the war broke out with the Allied defense line almost at the same time. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. As the main force of defense, the 8 combat bunkers were all fired up in an instant, like a powder keg spraying ammunition outwards. The firepower was dense and terrifying, as if 5 conscripts were bombarding the same target together, and because of the battle thanks to the blessing of the bunkers, the rate of fire was even faster than usual. As a result, under the bombardment of these 8 combat bunkers, the Yuri recruits of the Vanguard Army seemed to be being beaten for a while, and accompanied by the magnetic storm coil violent bombardment, each shot can accurately kill a Yuri recruit. In the rear, many conscripts and anti-aircraft crawlers were also firing on all cylinders, trying their best to output as much as possible. Any Yuri recruits who approached were quickly killed with concentrated fire. However, with such firepower, Yuri's army of new recruits also fought back forcefully. Under the concentrated fire, 2 battle bunkers were quickly exploded, and 4 sentry guns and a magnetic storm coil were also demolished, as if they were being destroyed. It was as if the entrance to the bridge had been forcibly torn open. Different dimension. Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 568. Just like when the building was destroyed, after the battle bunker exploded, the mobilization soldiers stationed inside were still safe. After being exposed, they worked with the soldiers who took up positions in the rear to forcibly repair the hole and block the hole. Together with other defensive buildings and soldiers and tanks, although both sides fought desperately to block the attack, although there were casualties on each other, the overall trend was towards the coalition's defense line. However, not long after the fierce battle, the armored regiment of Yuri's army also approached. Tornado tanks and Get tanks ran rampant, shooting all the way, running over the soldiers blocking the road, but they were also followed by the Rhino tanks and the nearby Rhino tanks behind them. The sentry gun was turned on. In the distance, after the magneto-electric tank was in place, it also began to emit strong magnetic waves from a very long distance, specifically targeting the defensive buildings of the coalition defense line to destroy them. What's even worse is the dozen or so mind-controlled vehicles. The Allied defense line is also unwilling to be left alone. They directly pass over the magneto-electric tanks, bypass the tornado tanks, getter tanks, and infantry teams, and savagely break into the depths of the defense line. Anyone under their control, all the coalition forces within the range were quickly controlled by him, and in turn they opened fire on their former comrades, making the scene chaotic. The coalition forces have not yet acquired the manufacturing technology for phantom tanks. There are only 4 tanks on the front line, but in the face of more than a dozen unscrupulous mind control vehicles, they cannot control the situation at all. Under this situation, the coalition's first line of defense seems likely to collapse at any time. It is indeed difficult to deal with. Compared with the pure firepower competition in the past when fighting with the Allies, Yuri's troops are indeed more difficult to deal with. Seeing this situation, in the command post, Rovitsky couldn't help but take a breath of air conditioning. He finally realized why Wang Ling felt so busy at the beginning. It was really difficult for Yuri's unit to fight with multiple arms. Taming. Zhao Pingwang also gritted his teeth and stared at the battle situation and said, "The other arms are easy to say, at least they can suppress them with force and firepower, but those mind-controlled vehicles are really tricky. Hurry up and order all the defense buildings in that area to deal with the mind control vehicles first." General Li Wiki couldn't help but temporarily change the order. Yuri's troops as a whole are very dangerous, but the most dangerous thing for the defense line is these mind-controlled vehicles. When the order was issued, dozens of troops on the first line of defense had been forcibly controlled, along with more than a dozen tanks. Under overload control, these mind-controlled vehicles were also shaking and bleeding. But at the beginning, the coalition defense line didn't know how to deal with it. Whether it was other soldiers, tanks, or combat bunkers, they were all concentrating fire to kill the controlled troops. In the end, it relieved some of the burden on the mind control vehicles. Now, the order was issued, and all combat bunkers and sentry guns within the fire range quickly changed their targets and concentrated fire on these mind-controlled vehicles. This battle was the first battle after the advent of the combat bunker. The combat effect was indeed unexpectedly good. The mobilized soldiers who could have been easily controlled could shoot as much as they wanted while hiding in the combat bunker. As long as the combat bunker, not even the mind control car can control them unless they are broken. Taking advantage of this convenience, the 3 surrounding combat bunkers opened fire like crazy. After focusing their fire for a period of time, they finally managed to blow up 3 mind control vehicles. However, during this period of time, the mind control vehicle was not idle either. More than 10 soldiers were controlled and forcibly exchanged fire with the coalition forces. Other Yuri recruits and tanks were also frantically dismantling, and 2 more were destroyed. With the magnetic storm coil and 2 battle bunkers, the situation on the first line of defense has obviously been reversed and has begun to tilt towards Yuri's troops. Seeing this scene, General Lewicki and 3 others in the command post were sincerely anxious. But at this moment, an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle suddenly drove in from behind the eastern castle area. Without any notification, it ran rampant, passed the coalition base, rushed directly onto the bridge, and stopped when it was near the war zone. Suddenly a person walked out. Wang Ling. Ha ha ha, it's better to come sooner than later, I finally caught up. Great. With Wang Ling's firepower here, I don't believe Yuri's troops can turn the world upside down. General Lewicki and the other 3 were extremely excited when they saw this person appear in the electronic video. Isn't this person Wang Ling? Now, they have gone through double training and become elite combat soldiers. They left to undergo assessment and training when they were stable. Now when the war situation is the most chaotic and unfavorable, they have arrived in a hurry. How can General Lewicki and the 3 of them not be excited? For the coalition defense line, the current battle situation could collapse at any time, but they believed in Wang Ling and believed that Wang Ling's firepower could completely reverse the situation of the battle. In fact, Wang Ling did not disappoint them. As soon as he entered the Holy City area, he saw the situation from the electronic map. Although the journey was tiring, he did not bother to rest at all and ordered the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles to go straight to the front. Suddenly join the battlefield. He is holding an enhanced version of the AK rifle. As a 1-star veteran level elite combat soldier, he has very strong combat power and extremely vicious vision. He can sort out the battle situation at a glance. After getting out of the car, he picks up the rifle and points at a mind control vehicle. Shoot. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Although he was still an infantryman, Fan Tao, the firepower of this elite combat soldier was enough to pose a fatal threat to tanks and vehicles. Under his strafing, the health of the mind-controlled vehicle dropped extremely quickly, and it would be destroyed in a matter of seconds. Being blown up, the speed is only faster than a tank bombardment. After getting rid of this one, Wang Ling then strafed another one. In conjunction with several nearby battle bunkers and sentry guns, he concentrated on all the mind-controlled vehicles that crossed the line. The firepower was superimposed, and all the mind-controlled vehicles were quickly killed one after another. After the explosion, the soldiers and tanks who had been controlled and were killing each other suddenly woke up. However, due to the current situation, they could not worry about anything and hurriedly blocked the gap in the front line. While these mind control vehicles were being dealt with, the battle on the front line was also showing a tendency to collapse. Except for the 2 battle bunkers slightly behind, all other defensive buildings were dismantled. The remaining troops of Yuri's army began to forcibly invade the bridge. Try to overwhelm the guards. Everyone, hold on, I won't let any of these invading Yuri troops go, I'll kill them all. At this time, Wang Ling raised his AK rifle high and shouted loudly. When the coalition guards, whose morale was declining due to the war situation, heard the sound, they immediately realized that Wang Ling was back, and their spirits were instantly shaken. Among them, there were naturally the guards of the Wolf Group. When Wang Ling returned, they seemed to have found a backbone, and some of them even couldn't help shouting loudly. However, due to the situation of the battle, even if they regained their morale, these soldiers had no time to turn around and salute Wang Ling. They all withstood the momentum of Yuri's troops one by one and focused their fire on the counterattack. After mobilizing his morale, Wang Ling also twisted his neck, holding an AK rifle, and then joined the battle and started a strong counterattack. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 569. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. This battle was Wang Ling's first battle after successfully transforming into an elite combat soldier. Although he was very annoyed by the invasion of Yuri's troops, Wang Ling happened to be able to take advantage of this opportunity to test the combat effectiveness of the elite combat soldiers and adapt to them. This battle rhythm. After joining the battle, Wang Ling quickly fired with an enhanced version of his AK rifle. Any Yuri recruit he spotted would be killed in an instant without any resistance. Within a few seconds, one round of sweeping shots would kill them. More than 10 Yuri recruits were shot and killed. The efficiency of this clearing force was not inferior to that of the SEALs. Moreover, the shooting range of the elite combat soldiers was much longer than that of the SEALs. Wang Ling just stood next to the battle bunker and fired as much as he wanted. All the Yuri recruits could not reach him and were quickly shot dead. After several rounds of fire, the charging Yuri infantry team was wiped out. Wang Ling then changed the target and began to shoot at a Get tank that was frantically attacking the battle bunker. Dense fire snakes poured out and poured on the Getter tank. The health bar on the top of the Getter tank's head quickly slid down. It was almost blown up by Wang Ling single-handedly in just a few seconds. The magnetic blast infantry at the level of the 10-star Soldier King can quickly kill this Getter tank after accumulating electromagnetic energy. However, the magnetic blast infantry is already at the Soldier King level. Wang Ling's current elite combat soldier is they are just veteran stars. Comparing the two makes a judgment. This scene was seen by several mobilization soldiers beside Wang Ling, and their eyes widened in horror. If ordinary conscripts like them want to kill a Getter tank, it would take 5, 6, or even 10 more people to concentrate their fire and fire for a while to blow it up. But Wang Ling can do it in a few seconds by himself. This gap in combat power is too huge, right? Otherwise, it is a hero-level unit. For ordinary conscripts, things that are shocking to the imagination are already normal for Wang Ling. After destroying this Getter tank, he has no intention to understand other people. With his thoughts in mind, he took a few seconds to kill the second and third Getter tanks. Then the crosshairs turned, and another tornado tank started to bombard other conscripts. Under the raging fire snakes, the health bar on the top of the tornado tank was also rapidly shrinking. The tornado tank's armor and health were higher than those of the Getter tank, so it was naturally more resistant to beatings. However, in the end, under Wang Ling's shooting, it only lasted a few seconds longer than the Getter tank, and was completely blown away with a bang. Wang Ling's firepower seemed to never be restrained. After killing this tornado tank, he immediately started shooting at the next tornado tank, as if he was constantly harvesting the lives of tanks on the battlefield. Whenever he was killed, all the tanks he targeted were unable to escape the fate of being blown up. The originally horrified mobilization soldiers could not say anything until they saw this. They had gradually become numb to Wang Ling's abnormal combat power. What a powerful combat force! What kind of military unit is this? After noticing Wang Ling's return and his fighting status from the electronic video, General Reagan couldn't help but gasp in the Allied camp command post, "That's Wang Ling." In the past few days, I heard from Li Wiki of the Allied forces that he was going. He has received new training. Is this the type of soldier he is? This guy was already incredibly strong, and now that he has become such a powerful type of soldier, his threat is even greater. Are these elite combat soldiers? They are truly a heroic unit of the coalition forces. They are truly incredibly powerful. Ha ha ha, a hero-level unit. There is only one like this in the entire coalition, and he is a member of our base. Isn't this the envy of other bases? No matter which base they are in, they are all heroes of our coalition. Now in this battle, with Wang Ling joining us, Yuri's troops will be in trouble. Different from the Allied camp, in the Allied command post, General Li Wiki and the three generals were delighted to see Wang Ling's combat effectiveness, and were even very excited. This blocking battle was originally very unfavorable for the coalition camp, but Wang Ling's return was able to turn the tide of the battle with one person. This is the power of the coalition hero-level unit. Da-da-da. Click. Click. Boom. At the first line of defense of the coalition camp, the fierce battle was still going on, and Wang Ling was like a battlefield harvester in the melee, still harvesting the lives of all tanks within the shooting range. When there is a war, there are sacrifices. In this fiery battle, both sides are constantly increasing the number of casualties. However, with the addition of Wang Ling's firepower, the coalition defense line has completely surpassed them in terms of firepower. From the beginning, passivity turned into initiative. As Wang Ling continued to harvest enemy tanks, the coalition defense line was almost suppressing Yuri's troops. All Yuri's infantry were swept away, and the remaining tanks were also wiped out. Car after car exploded. Among them, it can be said that about half were created by Wang Ling. If ordinary conscripts were to destroy so many enemy tanks in one go, the accumulated experience would probably be enough to be promoted to the 7-star ace level, but if it fell on the heads of elite combat soldiers, they would not be able to make them promoted from 1-star veteran to 3-star elite. It can be seen that this elite combat soldier needs a lot of experience to advance. It is no wonder that when Wang Ling was at his most energetic, he changed arms one after another and received the experience book of the arms, which already made him drowsy. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The battle was still going on. After wiping out all the Yuri troops within the shooting range, Wang Ling could clearly feel that he was very close to the 3-star elite level, so he made a strong effort, switched from defense to offense, and passed the mobilization soldiers and soldiers fighting fiercely in front. The tank pushed to the front and continued to deliver powerful output. Click. Click. Boom. As a result, the Yuri troops in this area suffered a lot. They could have fought fiercely with the ordinary coalition guards for a while, but with such a pervert, in conjunction with other conscripts, Rhino tanks, and even Apocalypse tanks, the remaining the Tornado tank and Getter tank were beaten to pieces in a short period of time and exploded one after another. And as the last Tornado tank was blown up, Wang Ling killed so many enemies in a row. The experience he accumulated finally allowed him to go from a 1-star veteran to a 3-star elite in one go. Due to the characteristics of the game, Wang Ling was promoted to an elite, and Wang Ling's body also shimmered with light, which fell into the eyes of others, and there was another burst of wonder. But Wang Ling had already closed his eyes, accepting the strengthening of this military experience, and trying his best to feel the power of elite combat soldiers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 570. Elite level elite combat soldiers have a faster rate of fire, a higher frequency, and a wider shooting range. Compared with 1-star veterans, they are almost twice as powerful. And for the enemy, is this enhanced threat more than doubled? After the enhancement of physical fitness and firearms was completed, Wang Ling finally opened his eyes again. He was obviously very satisfied with the enhancement. The sudden strong combat power also made Wang Ling feel refreshed and confident. Looking at the enhanced version of the AK rifle that stopped flashing in his hand, Wang Ling smiled. As the level increases, do you need some targets to try on? After laughing, he raised his head and looked at the only remaining magnetron tank of Yuri's army outside the distant defense line. These magneto-electric tanks did really bad things during the battle. They hid in the distance and attacked the defensive buildings of the coalition defense line. Almost half of the damaged defensive buildings today are from these magneto-electric tanks. Even now, all other units have been swept away, but the remaining magneto-electric tanks are still greedily attacking a magnetic storm coil. Observing the actions of these magneto-electric tanks, the coalition guards suddenly became furious and wanted to attack them in groups and completely eliminate these Yuri troops. But Wang Ling temporarily waved his hand back and interrupted everyone else. Stop, leave it to me. After saying that, he didn't even wait for the other soldiers to react. He rushed forward alone, picked up his rifle and started shooting forcefully. Among Yuri's troops, magneto-electric tanks are also a very tricky unit. They can destroy buildings from long distances and even absorb tanks. It is very difficult to cooperate with mind-controlled vehicles. But a single type of magneto-electric tank has no way to deal with infantry, let alone a pervert like Wang Ling. He was completely confident when he attacked by himself, and under the powerful elite-level firepower, more than 10 magneto-electric tanks were beaten by him alone. The explosion of the magneto-electric tanks could be heard with every breath. It seemed that more than a dozen magneto-electric tanks were not enough for him to fight alone. In less than 20 seconds, they all exploded. An elite combat soldier who was a 1-star veteran was already extremely powerful, let alone a 3-star elite. With its skyrocketing combat effectiveness, it is indeed a hero-level unit. After others saw the fate of these more than 10 magneto-electric tanks, they were all shocked. They seemed to have an unbelievable feeling about Wang Ling's current combat effectiveness. After a long time, someone finally came to his senses and cheered. 1. Mom, it doesn't matter how many Yuri's troops are, why don't we just destroy them? Ha 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 ha. Oh. 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 Team leader, awesome. Keep playing. Play again. The ball is dead. Dot. The magneto-electric tank dog was at the very rear of Yuri's army. As Wang Ling swept and wiped it out, it officially symbolized the failure of Yuri's army's attack and was all counterattacked by the coalition forces. Faced with such a ferocious attack before, the coalition defense line was miserable and could be defeated at any time. However, Wang Ling suddenly returned, and his powerful firepower quickly made up for the lack of combat effectiveness of the coalition defense line, and finally successfully withstood Yuri's troops. Attack. The contrast between the before and after comparison was so great that many soldiers felt like they were in a dream and felt a little bit unreal. But after coming back to his senses, he felt a more heartfelt excitement and admiration. Especially the group of troublemakers in the Wolf Group. No matter how powerful Wang Ling is now, he is still their chief group leader. So, under the leadership of the grey-faced Sun Dehua, a group of people directly lifted Wang Ling up and continued to lift him up. Tossing. And Wang Ling was not that saintly, but he was happy to enjoy the victory, and kept laughing while being thrown high. In this battle, Yuri's troops had accumulated strength for a long time and assembled a large number of troops. That posture was clearly intended to wipe out all the troops in the eastern castle area in one go. But in the end, they still failed. They failed so cleanly that they didn't even succeed in breaking through the coalition's first line of defense. However, it is not so easy for the coalition forces. Through the previous repeated obstructions, all the time gained was used to build defensive buildings and step up the defense. However, under this round of Yuri's attack, the front line defense buildings were almost completely destroyed, with only one remaining. The magnetic storm coil and 2 sentry guns were all on fire and were being repaired by engineers. The number of losses of the troops was also not small. Preliminary estimates indicate that the total number of infantrymen of all types who died in this battle directly exceeded 200, and more than 50 tanks of various types were destroyed. The losses were very heavy. Blocking the enemy from the first line of defense was a brilliant achievement, but it was not only due to Wang Ling's strong return, but also mainly due to the desperate counterattacks of all the troops, risking their own lives to plug various gaps. Forced to change it back. Although he won, it was a miserable victory. Of course, the Allied forces also felt uncomfortable. When the Allied forces were cheering at the end of the battle on the Allied defense line had also come to an end. Different from the coalition forces, they have phantom tanks that are very suitable for blocking Yuri's troops. They can specially attack Yuri's troops with powerful attack power. They also have SEAL troops that can instantly kill infantry and can kill Yuri's infantry team very quickly. However, even with this lineup, the Allied forces' first line of defense had been completely torn apart, and a large number of soldiers and tanks were killed. Even 6 of the Phantom tanks were destroyed by Yuri's troops because they exposed their targets. Of course, Yuri's troops also paid a bloody price for tearing through this first line of defense. The originally mighty troops suffered losses of more than 70%. Although the number of defensive buildings in the Allied second line of defense is very sparse and there is no time to build too many, and there are only a few machine gun bunkers to assist, the firepower of those soldiers and tanks is very powerful, and they even have long-range light prism tanks to kill. There was still no problem with the remaining 30% of the troops. After the two sides fought fiercely for a period of time, they finally completely eliminated all Yuri's troops at a heavy cost and ruined Yuri's offensive plan. However, compared with the coalition camp, this loss seemed to be heavier. Looking at the cheering coalition troops, they couldn't laugh at all. Team leader, give me a kiss. It's just the right time for you to come back. Haha, isn't it? If it's a little later, you'll have to collect the body for us when you come back. Ah, don't say such depressing words. Isn't the team leader back? Oh. 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 At the coalition defense line, the group of rogue soldiers from the Wolf group were still throwing Wang Ling high, shouting as they did so. Today's Wang Ling, not to mention his military exploits, even if he is just a hero-level unit with the rank of senior colonel, it is enough to attract the attention of all the top leaders of the coalition. When Wang Ling continued to be dismissed, General Li Wiki even personally led 2 deputies. He walked out of the command post and personally welcomed his return. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 571. Oh. 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 The soldiers of the Wolf group were still throwing Wang Ling high, venting their joy after the victory. At this time, General Li Wiki had already brought Zhao Pingwang and Raoski to the area. When he saw this scene, he deliberately covered his mouth and coughed twice. This sound was very small compared to the cheers, almost inaudible, but a group of soldiers around them were very sensitive. They heard the sound immediately and realized that the general was coming. They quickly stopped and gave a military salute to General Li Wiki. It happened that Wang Ling was thrown into the air for the last time, and no one in the group of cheaters went to pick him up. Wang Ling was so anxious that he wanted to curse. Fortunately, his body was flexible enough, and he quickly adjusted his landing posture in the air. After a roll, he spotted an open space and landed safely. He glared angrily at the group of cheaters around him. However, this group of scammers all gloated and pretended not to notice, making Wang Ling roll his eyes in anger. Afterwards, Wang Ling adjusted his mentality, crossed the crowd, and gave a dignified military salute to General Li Wiki. General, elite combat soldier, Wang Ling, come and report. General Li Wiki looked Wang Ling up and down, and after a while he nodded with great satisfaction, okay. Okay. The elite combat soldier has indeed lived up to his title of hero. Zhao Pingwang also joked, the only heroic unit in the entire army has landed in our base. It seems that our base is going to rise. Even Rovitsky had to be convinced, the elite combat soldiers have really strong firepower. Listening to these compliments, Wang Ling rubbed his nose, smiled awkwardly, and then said with some apology, General, Brother Zhao, look away, everyone, I'm sorry, I was a little late and caused losses to the troops. So serious. When the other soldiers heard what he said, the mood that was originally joyful because of the victory suddenly turned a little gloomy. Yes, although the attack by Yuri's troops was successfully defended, the losses to the base were very serious, and the number of casualties was almost frightening. Many of the former comrades in arms died in this battle. Those who were either friendly or the face that deserves a beating is now only a memory. General Li Wiki glanced at the troops, sniffed, sighed leisurely, stepped forward and patted Wang Ling on the shoulder, comforting and said, "I can't blame you, you came in time. Without you, I'm afraid the losses will be more serious. Don't put all the burden on your own shoulders, and don't forget that there is an old guy like me." "I understand." General Wang Ling finally felt relieved after hearing this. Pa, pa, pa. What a touching scene. Are you also sad because your comrades died in battle? At this moment, there was a sudden burst of applause from the direction of the Allied forces, accompanied by harsh sarcasm, which was very abrupt in the scene and greatly ruined the scenery. After hearing this, General Li Wiki, Wang Ling, and others frowned and turned to look at the source of the sound. They saw an Allied soldier with the rank of colonel in the direction of the Allied forces slowly walking towards here with 2 seals. The applause and sarcasm all came from the colonel. Although the 2 armies are now officially united under the pressure of the Seoul Empire and are each other's friendly forces, the 2 armies have been fighting for hegemony for so long, and there will always be some grudges between the 2 armies. In the early stages of the alliance, it is inevitable that there will be various problems. For example, right now, this Allied colonel is obviously coming with bad intentions. General Li Wiki narrowed his eyes slightly, stared at him and asked, "What does your army mean by this?" At this time, the colonel had already led 2 seals, stopped not far away, gave General Li Wiki a symbolic Allied military salute, and reported to himself, "Allied Base Number 1, Group 2." The team leader, Sun Yinglong, has met the general. After the report, Sun Yinglong put down his hands, as if the old god was here, and without waiting for General Li Wiki's response, he started talking to himself, "Congratulations to you all, you successfully defended the attack of Yuri's troops. Your and our armies are now that we are allies, we are naturally happy to see the scene and would like to send some congratulations." These words were just insignificant remarks for the occasion, and they were not taken seriously at all. General Li Wiki ignored his polite words and directly asked, "Stop saying these polite words. We just went through a big battle. You are not in your position to comfort us subordinate, what are you doing here with us? I don't believe you are just here to say these polite words." He. Sun Yinglong smiled playfully, and then his expression gradually became serious. "That's it, General, in the defensive battle just now, both your and our armies suffered heavy losses, but our army's defense line suffered at the very beginning because of your army's self-destructing truck. Unnecessary losses. For this, I would like to ask the coalition forces to give us an explanation. Feelings are here to investigate." No wonder he was so mean when he first showed up. Hearing what he said, General Li Wiki, as well as Xiaoping Wang, Rovsky, and even the other soldiers around them, their faces became very ugly. Wang Ling was a little confused and asked, "General, what's going on?" After all, he came a little late and didn't see that scene with his own eyes. King Xiaoming hurriedly stood aside and told him about the self-destruction truck that was controlled by Yuri's troops and exploded towards the Allied defense line. After hearing this, Wang Ling suddenly felt dumbfounded. He even asked over General Li Wiki, "Isn't it inappropriate to accuse us of this matter? Those self-destruction trucks were made by our base, but were they commanded by us? What are the characteristics of Yuri's troops that you don't know yet?" However, Sun Yinglong completely ignored Wang Ling's explanation and snorted coldly, "I don't care about this. I only know that the self-destructing truck was made by your coalition base, but it exploded on our Allied defense line, causing us great damage loss. This happened during the alliance between the 2 armies, and your coalition forces are fully responsible. Good guy. This posture is completely unreasonable and throws all the responsibilities to the coalition forces." Wang Ling was a little angry after hearing this. He was about to retort, but General Li Wiki interrupted him with his hand and asked in a dumbfounded voice, "What do you want from our coalition forces?" Sun Yinglong had been waiting for this question. He seized the opportunity and immediately said, "It's very simple. As long as the coalition forces hand over Wang Ling to us and serve for us, we will forget about this matter. Ouch. My dear, this appetite is too big. I think you guys are just thinking about eating shit. Look, look, what kind of face is the Allied forces? How come we got mixed up with this kind of army? I have never seen such a big face. Dot.